Oh, so many games that I want to play on the channel. I wish I had some sort of guidance to help me decide. Well, that's a start.
Greetings fellow flatcaps and welcome to the Spectrum. I've been really excited to talk about today's game because it's considered a living legend in the gaming world and has one hell of a history to cover. Space Invaders, a pop culture icon. One of the most influential, successful and memorable games of all time. Developed by Tomohiro Nishikado, it was inspired by Breakout as mentioned in previous videos. War of the Worlds, Star Wars, Space Battleship Yamato also played a part in its inspiration. But the strangest source of inspiration was a dream he had, where children were waiting for Santa Claus only to be attacked by aliens. Not only did Nishikado develop the game, but he also developed the hardware needed to run it. Imagine making a game so complex that you had to make a new system to run it. Nowadays they make games that can hardly work on anything. Space Invaders was recognised as the first ever fixed shooter game. The first game to save high scores, popularised the cocktail table style cabinet, and people often say it is THE game that ushered in the golden age of gaming and pulled gaming out of the video game crash of 1977. Even in today's culture, it continues to make cameos, products, campaigns, fan games, even develop games, as its most recent iteration was the 2020 title Space Invaders Gigamax. Of course, where there's massive success, there's also controversy. It helped spawn an urban legend where there was a shortage of 100 yen coins in Japan due to the popularity of the game. Within the first year of its release, the Japanese Parent-Teacher Association tried to get the game banned as it was causing truancy, but their efforts failed. In North America, doctors labelled a condition named Space Invaders Elbow, and the New England Journal named a similar condition Space Invaders Wrist. Politics would also get involved, as in 1981, the British politician George Fawkes attempted to introduce the Control of Space Invaders and Other Electronic Games Bill. If the bill had passed, then it would mean you were required to own a license to play Space Invaders. Okay, boomer. Finally, you know how Mortal Kombat is credited for accidentally introducing the age rating system? Well, what if I told you that Space Invaders almost beat them to it? Also in 1981, a political debate in Westchester, New York, tried to get Space Invaders age restricted because of the negative influences it was having on some school children. These influences included making them late for school and spending their lunch money to play the game. But this also failed. Boone keeps his crown, and all it took was extreme violence. All that within just 3 years of its initial release. And yet, we haven't covered everything in its past and current affairs, so let's dive straight into the game and see what actually makes this game so good. We start in 1978, and what is it you can say about Space Invaders other than it's a masterpiece? Its look, its sound, its gameplay, all iconic, instantly recognisable, and has stood the test of time. The arcade title, responsible for many elbow injuries, was one I never got to play myself, until now, where I was able to play it on MAME and in person by visiting the Blackpool Arcade Club. Instantly, I could see why the game was popular. Visually attractive and high-tech for the 70s, as well as emotionally manipulative gameplay. Have you ever been to a fun fair and they have those stalls with an easily achievable goal? You see a prize you want and you try and win one. How hard can it be? Get the ball in the hole, right? You fail once and you think, well, one more go, and then another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another.
2 hours later.
And another. Space Invaders is the same thing. The goal? Shoot the aliens before they hit the ground. The prize? Bragging rights for the high score. The cost? Way more money than you wanted to spend. We all know how this one goes. The enemy moves from right to left until they hit the edge of the screen, where they will go a row lower and repeat until they reach the bottom. You need to stop that from happening by shooting them. But this won't be as easy as it looks. The less aliens there are, the faster they come, occasionally trying to distract you with a mothership for bonus points. Clear the level and it resets slightly harder, and rinse and repeat till you die. To achieve this simple task, you had a stick and a button to move and shoot. Your movement was locked horizontally and the button fired a laser. For all you rapid fire fans, you can smack that button all you want. You can't fire another shot until the last one you fired has hit something. So no spray and praying for you. The enemies will of course be able to shoot back, and they are relentless. Even from the very first frame of the game, the aliens fire quickly and often. They fire different types of lasers. The spinning hammer, I think, and the sword can sometimes be shot, sometimes not, and the Harry Potter scar can be shot. All of which have the same strength and will kill you in one hit. The same can't be said about your shields. You have 4 shields that you can use as cover. Every hit from both the invaders and you will damage them in part. Eventually, they will leave a hole in them, but some players would do this on purpose so they could avoid enemy fire better. Other tactics included the Wall of Death, where players would shoot the invaders as they approached the wall, making them take longer to get closer. Players also would max out their score by counting their shots and making sure that certain shots hit the mothership for more points. Every time you hit 1500 points, you would get an extra life. Good luck getting that far though, as the pressure will get to you as you see them getting closer. Your focus dwindles as every shot missed feels like the biggest mistake. And that sound that every retro gamer knows and will curse the most steel of souls with anxiety. Those 4 simple note-based sounds. Easier than the arpeggio to learn, but as terrifying as a ticking time bomb. Almost like the invaders are mocking you. We will kill 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 you. We will kill.
You need to shut the fuck up!
With such a successful run in arcades, it was only a matter of time before the home ports, bootlegs, and copycats started making appearances. Copycats included Super Invader, which is a shameless clone of Space Invaders, TI Invaders, which stole the motif, but at least they tried to be original with their presentation. The Epoch TV Vader home console, which was the laziest clone I've ever seen, and there's even a Pepsi Invaders, where you play as a Coke can shooting down Pepsi. You might think this is a fan game, but you'd be wrong. This was commissioned by the Coca-Cola company to be given as gifts to executives. The 80s Atari port can also state that it's one of the quickest selling games of all time, selling 2 million copies in its first year, and was sometimes called an app killer, which by proxy increased the value of the 2600 and increased sales by as much as quadruple. It's not as graphically enhanced or as audibly intimidating as the arcade title. For the most part, it is the same game, but as is Atari tradition, you can make it monochrome and get multiple modes to choose from, except this cartridge gets to boast that it has 112 different modes. The only issue is, there isn't 112. The first few modes change the rules a little, such as increasing the invaders' fire rate, making them invisible, making your shields move, and firing wiggle rounds. The rest of the modes will combine multiple features together to make a new mode, which quickly repeat themselves. Eventually, a second player is allowed to join, and some of the modes will look exactly the same, but I think I figured out why. In some of the modes, the cover will move. Switching modes again will freeze the shields where they are. So really, this is just a way to manipulate the cover with a limited button system. The glaring problem, of course, is that if you don't get it where you want in the right amount of tries, it flips over to the next style. So you need to cycle all the way through again to reach where you were. It's clear to see that Space Invaders hit the gaming world with the same force of a nuclear bomb, but would the rest of its lineage be able to make such an impact? To find out, we're going up to 1979, where Taito then releases Space Invaders Part 2. Best described as an expansion pack, Part 2 was a copy and paste of the first title with some new features. The graphics stayed the same, but more colours were added. The more noticeable features included a more merciful AI, the high score limit reached 99,990, initial entries for high scores, A cutscene would play between the levels, the UFO could add enemies back into the level, and some enemies now split in two when shot. Other than that, it was just the same game, but was still met with much love from the fans. And that was the nicest way that the 70s could have ended for gaming. But then Midway would kick off the 80s with their own addition to the series, Space Invaders 2. While Taito handled the Japanese releases of the series, Midway had the license for overseas distribution. However, they weren't willing to do the same for Japan when they released this title in the West only. Not only did they make the first Westerner-only title, this was also the title that popularized the cocktail-style cabinet, and for a good reason. There was a new type of enemy. Yourself. Or a second player, depending. Once again, the game premise was the same, along with the sounds and the music. However, this time, you could play against an AI opponent who would try and shoot you, and if it did, it would steal a life from you. But the same applies if you shot it. What makes the AI so hard is that they are attacking you while you are trying to shoot down the invaders, who now have been reset to their aggressive arsehole style that was in the first game. On the plus side, the AI can shoot down the aliens too, and you will get credit if they do. Thanks dude, but I'm still gonna kill you. This enemy can be defeated if it runs out of lives and resorts back to traditional style gameplay. Except for that bitch of a mothership who now spawns in a whole row of enemies. The game itself seemed to have a few problems. A shot that missed you still manages to hit, and the wide screen that was vertically squashed did make judging your shots and positioning a little bit harder. In 2-player mode, each player gets their own side of the screen, with their own set of invaders to deal with. There is no winner system, as even after one player dies, the game continues until you're both dead. It was a nice little idea, but once again, the motif remained largely untouched and very little was added to the game. If I had to guess, I would say that this one didn't go down as well as previous titles, as not even Wikipedia, the most reliable source on the internet, has a page on it. This may be due to it being released only in America at the time, so the audience had considerably shrunk. It could also be due to the fact that the game hadn't really changed its look or style for a long time. The next title wouldn't come out until 1984-85. Technology had come a long way, and this was the year of hits like Track and Field, Kung Fu Master and Pac-Land. Let's see what Taito had for us this year. Well, it's certainly different. It may look like a rip-off game. However, this is indeed a Taito Space Invaders title named Return of the Invaders. Better graphics, advanced game mechanics, and a whole bunch of fuck you in it. The motif has changed a fair amount, so much that you wouldn't even know it was meant to be part of the Invaders series if I didn't tell you. As usual, if the invaders touch the ground, you lose. But this time, if they do manage to hit the ground, you lose all of your remaining lives and you're taken back to the start of the game. And a few changes mean that can now be achieved in a few ways. For starters, the enemies have all had a makeover, but are now more aggressive than ever and have multiple ways of attacking and formations to get at you. They shoot either blue, yellow or red bullets at you. Red ones can be blasted but blue can't, and yellow ones will home in on you. Sometimes you might shoot an enemy and they will fly out of control in an attempt to kamikaze you. These bastards are an absolute pain to deal with. They have to be shot right in the dick to die, otherwise they throw their shot back at you even faster, and even if you manage to land the shot, they transform into an alien that will fly around the screen and try and ram you. The Cha-Cha Slide is now not their only form of formation. They have a total of 3 formations they will use to reach the bottom of the screen. They have the classic side to side, the circle formation which is slower to descend but makes them harder to hit, and the vertical formation which makes them piss easy to hit but they descend at the fastest speed. Well, almost piss easy to hit. Your shields get in the way. The shields are now a solid shape that can't be blasted to pieces. They absorb shots with the colour representing the strength, going from blue to yellow to HAL 9000 and then blowing up.
You can still shoot through them, but only through this small gap here, which only opens when it's been destroyed. Most of the time by you. They also work against you at times depending on the formation. During the circle it's fine, but during horizontal, the shields periodically move side to side, block your shots when trying to implement the wall of death strategy, and during vertical formation, you need to shoot through your cover to kill them. Except for these bastards! Because doing it like this means you shoot their arm, which means they shoot back at you, so you need to wait until they destroy the shields in order to dick shot them. It was, however, because of these douchebags that I found out you can find bonus or challenging stages if you meet certain criteria. In this case, leave the last row alive and the bonus level will activate. To win, you need to beat the new enemy while they fire out one-eyed aliens, robots, and children? The game is ordering me to kill children to progress. Moving on. Logically, you would think that with a bigger challenge, then you would be powered up a little to take it on, right? Well, that's somewhat true. You can fire a lot faster, but you still can't fire until your shot vanishes like before. However, you can fire 2 shots before this rule takes effect. For the first time ever in the series, power-ups have been added. You can get weapon upgrades from the motherships if you take them down. They are free according to the fan wiki, but no description as to what they do. I only ever saw one during my playtime and couldn't see any difference, if I could get them in the first place, as sometimes the destruction of the mothership would also take the upgrade with it. As for the presentation, the graphics are vastly improved over the last, but the look won't be appealing to all fans. The invaders kinda look similar in shape, but with them being ships rather than aliens, it takes away from the charm of the original and it makes it look more generic. The same can be said for the sound effects. The tense music and iconic laser blast are gone, leaving us with this. The backgrounds are a nice touch on the plus side. Nothing spectacular and they change palette every level, but at least it looks more spacey now. Overall, I could compare this game to a celebrity trying to make a comeback. People like what they were, but not as many like what they became. It became the highest grossing game cabinet of 1985, but their success seemed to stop there, as new games around this time began pushing the limits of the tech in ways not seen before, both visually and mechanically. The series would struggle to hold relevance and eventually other titles began to take its spot, including everyone's favourite bull gobbler, Pac-Man. It was also around this time the home consoles would also take a step forward in their abilities, and systems like the NES would become competition for the arcade scene. Because of these factors, Space Invaders wouldn't be seen again until 1991, where it made the jump to the home consoles with the Sega Mega Drive exclusive Space Invaders 91, also known as Majestic 12 Space Invaders Part 4. What happened to Part 3? With the tagline, Kennedy would be mortified. Now, I'm no gaming marketing expert or designer, but if this was Space Invaders 2, the series could have done a lot better. Obviously not the graphics because the tech wasn't as advanced back then, but the mechanics and features in this game keep it feeling like the Space Invaders fans flocked to, while adding new mechanics and features that they could appreciate. Alas, the tech difficulties would have been too much for them at the time, but I can honestly say that this is a good entry to the series. It keeps the basics of the original, for one level at least, and then later the levels slowly introduce new mechanics and players will find themselves wanting to see it all. For starters, the enemy variety has increased, not just in look, but in capability. Some enemies can now fire in angles while others fire homing projectiles at you. Some are shielded and have to be shot twice, and some will move the opposite way in the formation in order to reach you faster. Even the environment will affect your abilities, as some will angle your shots or block off your movement. All these simple changes assist in making the motif feel fresh, yet familiar. What may throw players off is the fact there are now no shields. You no longer have 4 blocks to take cover behind, rather a life bar that's good for 5 hits. Don't get cocky though, as there are no healing items, so any damage you take will last until you die. The structure of the levels has been altered so that each level or round is split into encounters. Each round has 2 encounters. The second encounter is harder than the first as the invaders start a little lower. Should you die, the game shows a little mercy and will restart you on the current encounter, rather than at the beginning of the level. The music's also changed. Once again, it's not the tense 4-tone bass from the original, and it's not a cat wrestling a keyboard from Return. Instead, it's a mixture of eerie and action, and it sounds great. So it looks great, it sounds great, does it play great? It actually does. The controls are responsive and so simple they're near invisible. The first level serves as a practice warm-up for any Invader veteran, the only difference being that destroying the mothership may drop a power-up. When you do get a power-up, they can be a real game changer. I'm not sure if I did find all of them, but when I was able to grab power-ups, they would either allow me to destroy an entire row, destroy a clump in one go, freeze time, a shield, and 2 echoes that shot alongside me. It feels a lot more balanced than Return did, and the challenge, while somewhat difficult, is beatable even if it seems to fluctuate a little. For example, the second level I struggled with quite a bit because of the mixed formation and angled shots. That's not mentioning the magnet alien that can spawn in to pull you to the right of the screen constantly, which is just rude. Then on level 3, I never failed more than once, and the enemy's shots were very easy to avoid, even when I was blocked in by the asteroids. All in all, a much better attempt at a comeback than the previous one, and I'd highly recommend this one if you ever get the chance. But can it keep this performance up? 2 years later, Taito releases Space Invaders DX. It was a direct port of the original game, but included 2 extra modes, a 2-player split screen mode, and a, quote, parody mode, which replaced the invaders with characters from other Taito titles. Say that 3 times fast. Taito. Nope, can't do it. Speaking of parodies, the next title, Space Invaders 95 Attack of the Lunar Loonies, is an odd one. I won't cover it here because it looks worthy of an arcade video, but here is a preview of what you will see in that video. For the most part, things were going well for the series. The released titles from 91 were doing well, while not nearly as successful as the 78 title. But then, the new millennium rolled in. We survived Y2K, and it ushered in a new media fad that regrettably still goes strong to this day. You know when a series that might be silly, funny, or even just family friendly, then gets a dark and gritty bastardization? Well, in 2002, Space Invaders got the same treatment, as Taito released one of, if not the, most hated title to date, Space Raiders. No, not the crisps. There it is. The aesthetic of Space Raiders takes on the look of a somewhat dark and gritty alien invasion movie. Out of nowhere, the invaders attack and begin to ravage the Earth. You play as one of 3 survivors: Neji, a police officer, Justin, an average teenager, or Ashley, a fashion photographer with the powers of action film star, as they fight back against the invading alien horde. The gameplay shares a vague similarity to its previous titles, in which you shoot aliens that progressively get closer while you are fixed to an X-axis. Everything else is very different. For starters, the camera is now a third-person camera. Sometimes you can see the whole level, and sometimes you can only see about a third of it at any time. The enemy formations have changed from structured advancements to uncoordinated swarming, You have a power bar that lets you throw a grenade or use special attacks, a dodge mechanic that lets you dive out of the way of bullets, sometimes, and it can be used to shoulder barge enemies to death. The cover you had has now become easily destroyable barrels, part of the environment can be destroyed to get pickups, and death has little consequence as you have unlimited continues, and the cost of continuing your game? Losing all of your points.
Oh no! Anyway.
Each of the characters plays differently with their own unique power attacks. Though the game offers no stats for them, you quickly discern who is the best and worst to play as. For me, Justin is the worst. He has an average speed, average damage output, and his special is a short rapid fire burst. Sounds decent, but compared to Neji and Ashley, he quickly fell obsolete.
Loser! You're a loser!
Neji is slow in both movement and attack speed, but has a powerful as all buggery special move. He releases 2 orbs onto the field. Shooting these orbs will ricochet his bullets towards the closest enemy faster with more damage. And with how long the orbs last, they can clear multiple waves with ease. Ashley is the most powerful attacker as she has the fastest movement and attack speed, but her special is just a louder grenade that does the same thing as a regular grenade, only it uses more energy to do. Despite that, Ashley is easily the best character for one simple reason: the lack of pickups. Despite being something that could change the tide of battle, the pickups in the game hardly ever make an appearance. They do drop from things you can destroy in the environment and the small little ship that flies across the battlefield. They may drop from cover once you destroy them, and never from enemies. A small variety allows the pickups to give you advantages for a very short time. These include health restoration, increased fire rate, holographic turrets, freeze time, increased speed, and invincibility. There's also a partial refill to your super meter, but with the power-ups being a limited resource, and this particular one being one of many random drops, your super meter stays empty most of the time, meaning on average, Neji can only use his special once per life, meanwhile Ashley continuously uses her high damage output as her standard attack. So in short, girl power takes the day here. God, I am old. Whoever you decide to play as, it doesn't affect the story's narrative so much. Oh yeah, there's a story mode. Unlike the gameplay, the story is hardly affected by your character choice. The main difference is a few lines will be different.
You leave me no choice.
You leave me no choice.
Shoot! They're coming!
The story mode is a damn slog to get through. The levels are composed of different waves of enemies that will attack you. Defeating the wave throws you into a loading screen as it prepares the next one. Here's the kicker. Some of these waves can almost take a minute to defeat, while others can be taken care of in under 10 seconds. Which wouldn't be an issue if the waves were 4, maybe 5 at most, with regular power-ups to speed up the process. But in the first chapter of the game, it does this for 10 rounds before pitting you against the boss. Honestly, I timed it. It took me 15 minutes to complete the first level, all because I had to kill enemies with no power-ups, wait for a loading screen. Presenting the game like this slows it right down to a crawl so slow that waiting for the next Game of Thrones book feels faster. The boss levels, oh, they're even worse. They take even longer, and I'm convinced they're even slower. The regular enemies are your basic cannon fodder. Some will die in a single hit, while others die in 2 to 3 at most. Hitting them can be a real chore at times. Your bullets will collide with theirs regardless whether it is they shoot at you, and will either destroy both bullets or just your bullet. Consider this while taking into account the fact that they have a high fire rate and like to crowd together, so you won't be able to hit the aliens as a wall of projectile fuck yous are flying at you. Once again, slowing the game down. The boss is even worse. With no life bar on screen, you don't know how long you need to pelt the fucker with bullets, and, spoilers, it's a lot. On top of the bullet sponge bosses, the designers thought it was a good idea to include ads as well. Now, if they got it right, defeating the ads would give you something to help you fight the boss. Health recovery, damage power-ups. No, they're just there to be a pain in the ass. made even more so due to the fact that enemies can shoot through each other, making it harder to see when a shot is incoming, and B, the camera changes during a boss fight, which makes it even harder to see when an enemy is coming in. You ever played a game where the question, "How did you fuck that up?" isn't enough to describe it? They honestly really fucked up with this game. It could have been something so much better, but they got everything wrong. The lack of power-up spawns, the messy enemy formations, stupid amount of enemy fire rate, imbalanced characters, imbalanced gameplay, tedious boss fights, and minimal effort storytelling. If I was to say at least one good thing about this game, the graphics are decent for the time, and it can actually get a good frame rate. But saying that is like saying Skyrim is better now because you added fishing. I'm starting to think I'm growing a slight hate boner for Todd Howard. Despite the failure of this title, the Space Invaders series was still met with excitement whenever a new title was released. We're only going to look at one more title, but here's a quick rundown of the rest that I know of. Space Invaders Anniversary, a compilation title. Space Invaders Extreme, Space Invaders, but extreme! Space Invaders World War, the failed MMO. Space Invaders Gigamax, 10-player Space Invaders. With those loosely covered, we're now going to look at one final game to cover in this video. The Xbox 360 title, Space Invaders Infinity Gene. It's just the first game. What? Okay. Okay, never mind. This game is quite an unusual one, but in a good way. The premise at first matches the original motif, but as you play, your genes will evolve and the game will unlock new features. This could be new modes, new ships, new music, or even upgrades to your ships. The enemies will evolve as you progress further into the game also, starting with the classic looking foes before turning into bigger spaceships and more abstract looking enemies. It's a metaphor. The best part is they aren't just a skin change. Every enemy has their own set of attacks, movement patterns, health, strengths and weaknesses. They are introduced at a reasonable rate to match the increased challenge. As a result, it doesn't feel repetitive or stale quickly, and if you happen to get stuck on a level, the rate in which you level can help you get past it quickly. As you unlock more features, the game will begin to feel less like Space Invaders and more like a space shooter bullet hell. That's not necessarily a bad thing. One way to look at it is that it looks like a visual presentation as to just how much the fixed shooter genre has changed over the decades. Arcade lovers and retro enthusiasts alike will start to compare it to games from their past as the game evolves, like Galaga, Geki Rindan, and 1941 Counterattack. Gameplay itself is pretty solid. The controls are responsive and simple, with only a stick and button scheme, and despite it being very easy in the first chapter, each chapter after that changes the level design a little bit, making it feel like a new game. Chapter 1 is the standard motif. The invaders are at the top of the screen and you're avoiding their shots while taking them down. As you progress through chapter 1, it slowly changes as the formations start to become more erratic, and some of the enemies start showing off new abilities. When chapter 2 rolls around, the formations get even more erratic and new foes are introduced. Then in chapter 3, larger than life bosses will push your limits. Each ship you unlock has its own firing mode and changes how you have to approach the levels, some of which will turn big bosses into little bitches. One problem I do have with the game is that it can sometimes feel like it's punishing you for doing too well. An example of this is in this boss fight, named after England's greatest anomaly, the Sun. Looks more like a Death Star, but whatever. It has one attack where it launches a laser that takes up the entirety of the screen, and you have no way of avoiding it unless you still have the shields. The catch is that 4 invaders will eat away at the shields, and you can't shoot through the shields to hit the invaders. So if you've made it this far without a ship that can do a wide shot or has a homing attack, you're fucked. If you have enough lives, you can tank through it, but still, dick move. Another issue I have is that some of the upgrades let you do Nagoya attacks. I wasn't able to figure out how to do these attacks, but according to this one, I have a short time after an enemy has fired a shot to be immune to it. I don't believe you. The soundtrack is hard for me to comment on. It's not my go-to style of music, but it does have some tracks in it I like. The music is composed of a mixture of space rock and techno-esque music, which is made using a mixture of retro music sounds like you would hear in the original and electronic instruments. It does add to the action, but it was a hit or miss for me. Maybe that's because I'm old by the internet standards. Finally, the graphics. This somewhat minimal style is very reminiscent of Atari and Taito's earlier games. Despite the simplicity, it's very well constructed but isn't shy about getting fancy with what it is it can actually do. And it never gets hard to see where you are on the screen, no matter how chaotic it gets. But it can be difficult at times to decide what you can and can't touch. Overall, good game. 5 out of 7, would play again. Tempted as I am to keep talking about the other Space Invader games, there are way too many to cover and I don't think I could get away with doing a video that long unlike some other YouTubers.
So, Space Invaders. Did I like it? Absolutely did. It's true that maybe nostalgia and its historical reputation have influenced this decision a bit, but even without those, the game itself is a great title that offers up a good challenge and competition with friends. Now of course, by today's standards, this is a bare minimal game and some would compare it to a cheap mobile game you could play on the bus while riding to a job that you hate. But even then, it's something you can enjoy and get a good time out of. There's not much to it, but sometimes a little does a lot, and that's all you need. So Space Invaders, without a doubt, is filed under yes. Of course, what about you though? Do you like it? Is it part of your childhood? What memories do you have of it? Do you think it's overrated? As always, your comments are welcome down below. And I hope you like this video and continue to come with me on this 1001 step journey. If you do decide to come with me, thanks for watching everyone, and remember you're always welcome at the Spectrum.